Hi everybody, Don DeCrucell here from New Jersey, USA. This is my session summary for remote viewing target 9355-9796. The target statement reads, "Move to the optimum position to describe and sketch the Philip experiment," shown in the video clip, and they provide this YouTube link. Okay, I highly recommend everybody watch this video because it's an experiment you really need to know about. And to summarize it here briefly, the video shows a group of people sitting around a card table, hands lying flat on the tabletop. It looks like they're holding a seance and speaking to and asking questions of a discarnate individual by the name of Philip. But Philip, you see, never existed. He was, in fact, a creation of their imagination, an imaginary ghost, a completely fictitious, made-up entity. In the fall of 1972, Dr. George Owen, the director of the Toronto Society for Psychical Research, devised this experiment. He wanted to show that paranormal phenomena could be created without the help of spirits from another plane or dimension. He wanted to show that living beings could project energy onto material objects by creating a fictitious character with the name, age, gender, and nationality they specified. The participants came up with Philip, a 30-year-old aristocratic Englishman living in the 17th century in England. He lived in Diddington Manor with his wife Dorothea, but Philip fell in love with a local gypsy woman named Margot, and when Philip's wife discovered her husband's clandestine meetings, she had Margot convicted of witchcraft and later burned at the stake. Overcome by remorse, Philip took his own life, flinging himself from the battlements of his manor house. The participants of this experiment met for 10 years in the same room, attempting to conjure or contact the spirit of Philip, and things started to happen. Like they started hearing raps, noises on the table movements, even levitations. Sometimes the raps would only occur under the hands of the person speaking to Philip. One of their sessions was filmed in a television studio and captured before a live audience. Both the table elevations and the rapping sounds were captured. There are many more details included in this video, and I do encourage the viewers to check it out. I did 3 sessions for this target, and I have to say, up front, in my first session, my subconscious didn't seem to know how to report it. My perceptions were scattered and vague. You'll see quite a difference when we get to my second and third sessions later on. Let's start with my summary for session 1. Primary gestalts. A flat land-based surface with natural depression. An observed artifact partially sticking out of the ground. An excavation that exposes the same thing. I'm always fascinated by how my subconscious describes things. An observable artifact partially sticking out of the ground, huh? Now, I don't think of a card table as sticking out of the ground, but apparently my subconscious did, at least then. And my next perception, an excavation that exposes an artifact. Well, I don't think of a seance as digging or an excavation, but again, my subconscious perception did. And this is part of the vagueness that I was talking about earlier. It's amazing how this is going to clean up later. Then I discussed my perceptions about a terrain, spacious, relatively flat, and isolated. I thought of this data as being outdoors in bright sun and warm temperatures. At first I thought all of this data was off target, but then I started to wonder if my subconscious was trying to report bits of the Philip backstory. The fact that he lived in a spacious manor house with surrounding grounds and shrubbery. If that's what my subconscious is reporting here, you can see how it was struggling to find the right angle to describe this target. Then I got this perception that there was a ditch or a ledge. The Philip backstory said he committed suicide by jumping off the battlements of his house. If that's what we're talking about here, or that ledge is actually the meeting room card table, and that's pretty vague. The third part of this summary talked about an artifact. I felt it was exposed near a depression. There's some other stuff here that seems like analytic overlay, but I thought having roots in the past, studied and considered amazing, back on target. I felt this artifact was lifted, rising, or sticking up. And that's true if you think about the tabletop lifting and rising up. This video also shows the table sliding around and then coming to a stop on the floor. I think my subconscious finally started zeroing in on the participants around the table. I wrote upright or diagonal disposition, and then the word amazing. Indeed, everybody was amazed. So there is some truth mixed in amongst the confusion here in this session. For my visuals, the best I could see in this session was some sort of flat surface that stood in front of a person, sitting or kneeling. I thought it was protruding upward from the ground, but now that I know what the target is, I think my subconscious wanted me to draw a large flat surface in front of a person, that being the card table. So there's my first session. There's one last thing. I thought this ideogram was interesting. I got the impression there were inscriptions on the so-called ledge, which I now believe was the tabletop. And I asked what significance they played. When I whacked out this ideogram, I immediately wrote the word yipes, because, check it out, it looks like a straight line, an ampersand, and a jagged line. It was telling me the significance was about two things, and I interpreted those two lines to mean the physical and the non-physical, and understanding the both of them. I thought this was pretty interesting. So, in summary, I felt this session was confusing. After I turned in my first session, the project manager sent this retasking statement. Move on the perceptions of who, why, where, and how. Pretty vague, as it should be, but it doesn't make any difference to me. I write these things down only to document the retasking. I don't pay any attention to them at all. My ideograms tell me the story. And once again, let's go straight to the session summary. Now this does get more interesting. The general gestalts in this session were something going around in a circle, which seemed to involve energy that is or was directed to capture something loose and control it. Oh my God, how accurate is that? People were sitting around a card table, and while they were thinking they were channeling something imaginary, my subconscious is telling us that they were directing their energy to capture something that was loose. The energy, I guess, and control it. Oh, wow! And it goes further. This leads to an explosive interaction or collision, possibly with a splintering or shattering side effect. Now there's your wraps on the table, for sure. And when the table was moving, it did bump into people there. which is kind of a collision. Beautiful. I like how my subconscious described this intense energy with a controlled destruction. Now, you and I don't think of knocking on a table as a controlled destruction, right? But what if we were in a different dimension? How would you create a knocking sound on a table surface when you'd clearly be directing energy somehow, right? And to make the actual rapping noise, maybe that energy needs to explode in some way or impact something else that creates a shock wave. Very interesting perception. All right, now here's a little featurette. Let's go over this ideogram in detail. The way I interpret these guys is pretty straightforward, really. Something coming from over there, way over there on the left side, off the screen, and it's meandering toward us until it gets very close. And then, look at this, it gets caught in a loop, comes down and hits hard. These perceptions are pretty accurate for this target. The psychic or mental energy used to create Philip did have distant origins. And my subconscious is telling me whatever that thing was traveling from a distant origin was under intelligent control. Interesting. The researchers didn't think of themselves controlling the fictitious Philip entity. They just wanted to channel it. But my subconscious is saying they were actually intelligently controlling it. So apparently they were controlling it without realizing it. Not only intelligent control, but I heard the words that it was reaching out to them. Wow. How beautiful. The next part of my summary talked about a technical facility containing electronics and control surfaces, lots of wires, pipes bolted together. And again, at first glance, I thought this data was off target. But when I watched the video of them holding the Philip seance at the television station, I thought it was perfectly accurate. This short segment shows multiple pipes bolted together in the form of tripods, light stands, microphone booms, and there are technicians and audiences of scientific people watching on. So by and large, these data seem appropriate and accurate. In the last part of my session summary, I talked about a new knowledge, thinking, or data. Actually, that was the whole point of the Philip experiment, to prove that human beings could create paranormal phenomena without the help of spirits. The results proved this to be true. And what I'm seeing here is my subconscious is now getting more focused, right? I've noticed this in previous projects too, that my second or more sessions became more focused. I think this is a huge takeaway for any remote viewer. Okay, so let's move on to the third and final session here. I move to the energy and investigate. And this is my TDS transit line for that session. I like the TDS format in some cases because I often get very significant and curious data in their transit line scribble. This is done on the header page before you even start your session. Now let's have a look at this. Interesting but meaningless, right? It was meaningless to me too in session. But now that we know what the target is, let's reconsider. The target was about people sitting around a rectangular card table, trying to get any sort of physical phenomena from an imaginary being. Now look at this first part in the upper left. It's broken off. It's separate, and it seems to be indicating something's there that's self-contained. What the heck is it? At first glance, it sort of looked like a logo or maybe an aircraft symbol. But is it my imagination, or is that thing starting to look like a traditional white-sheeted ghost? And the next part indicates it's moving around, drifting down closer to what seems to be a rectangular area. And there's a symbol of a life form there, the L. Bingo. After that, there's a little arrowhead, which generally, at least for me, means energy directed toward something. So there's energy directed toward the life form? Right again. Then after that, it sort of drifts around and then away. Is this not amazing? Folks, you gotta study your ideograms, man. There's a lot of neat data in there. Alright, so anyway, I had no clue what this scribble meant at the time, so let's go straight into my session summary. This session seemed to discuss a continuous mental focus on a subtle energy leading to a back-and-forth exchange that was somehow educational and beneficial. Bullseye! I just love it! That is a beautiful description of the Philip experiment, but more importantly, coming from the viewpoint of my subconscious. The participants gathered around the table and focused their thoughts, the subtle energy that led to the paranormal phenomena they observed. My AOL may also be accurate, a communication between the conscious and subconscious minds. We'll think about that. My summary goes on. A repetitive process that can best be described as back and forth in nature. Indeed it was. They would first sit quietly, then vocalize, summon Philip to come and give them a sign. The table would move by itself, or make a rapping sound, and the participants would interact with the invisible fictitious Philip ghost. There were diminishing perceivables involved. Right. When the participants got tired or left the room, the phenomenon stopped. The domain of these perceivables seems limitless. AOL, the mind, the universe. What my subconscious is telling us here is that the energy pool the researchers were drawing upon is limitless. Wow, with a capital wow. And there's something idealistic about this process. Also true, this experiment was a huge success and forever changed the notions of how paranormal phenomena might be produced. And this culminated in a high point that faded. AOL temporary euphoria. Okay, you can clearly see that on the facial expressions of everyone in the YouTube video. When that table started floating around, the participants were amazed. So then I got a few more details here. The process begins quietly and peacefully, I presume through mental focus. Check. Then builds to a point where there's some sort of feedback or data is reflected back. That would be the noises, the rappings coming from the table, or the table movements. Check. The old is combined with the new. Yeah, after they see what's happening, they have to change their ideas. This is a major change to their belief systems. So yes again, check. This adaptation smooths out rough edges in the old and makes for a better continuance going forward. Wow, now that is so interesting. Do you think that you have rough edges in your belief system? I guess we do. I guess we're all afraid of the energy that is apparently everywhere, and that this experiment proves we can control. That, I believe, is the rough edge my subconscious is talking about. This misunderstanding, this fear. You have to think about that differently. What a wonderful perception. Wow. I list a couple of AOLs here, but I think the next statement is key. That communication, awareness, and realization are involved. Ka-ching. Good stuff. All of this is leading to a greater understanding, a transformation which must be reintegrated into one's ideas and self going forward. Whew. Wow. Wow. This is perhaps the most curious S3 I've ever created, and I think it speaks for itself. You need to interact with your subconscious, and it will interact with you. You will learn something from that experience and undergo a cycle of adaptation, and then the process repeats. So, wow. So, in conclusion, I hope you saw how my data improved and clarified with each session. I do wonder why my initial session seemed so vague, but I have a theory about that. I believe when I turned in each session, it helped the project manager refine their ideas of what they were looking for, and that, in turn, helped me. My data became clearer and more specific. That, and all the rest of the information here, I think is fun to think about. And I hope you enjoyed my presentation of this data. And with that, I thank you for watching.